Some stories arrive quietly, like a sunrise slipping through old curtains, and some wait a lifetime to be told. This is one about a second chance, a steady hand held in a late afternoon, and the simple, stubborn courage to say, "Out loud, my mate." Here, love learns to linger. If this story warms you, please subscribe, like, share, and tell us about your own late-blooming love below in comments. They say the heart knows before the head does. I believe that now. But the day I met him, on a cold, bright morning when the bay breathed little clouds into the air and gulls scolded a tide that took its time, I only knew the ordinary aches of my 62-year-old bones and the predictable comfort of my coffee. I had moved to Harbor's Gate a year earlier. It's one of those towns the state map barely names, tucked where Maine's gray water gathers in patient hands before it opens its fingers and lets go. Wooden shingles darkened by salt, porches that lean just enough to tell you wind has a voice out here, and the kind of diner where the staff remembers your order but won't fuss over you unless they can tell you're having a day. My daughter Carrie didn't come right out and say it, but I knew she thought the move was impetuous. Maybe it was. After 4 decades in Ohio carrying mail up cracked sidewalks and past untrimmed hedges, after burying a wife I loved in the way a friend loves a friend, after all those years I'd folded a part of myself into the smallest drawer, I wanted a place where the horizon ran wide enough for a late confession to breathe. The confession hadn't formed in words yet. It was more like a wind change. The truth has a way of tapping a window for months before you realize it's asking to come in. I walked into the diner with gloved hands. The bell above the door announcing me to Ruth, who runs the register and insists the whole town take more vitamins than we do. She said the same thing every morning. "You look good, Tom. Taking your D?" I'd nod, promise I was, and claim my window seat if no one had beaten me to it. That morning, the seat across the aisle was taken by a man I'd seen once before at the hardware store. He bought sandpaper and a stack of cedar planks, his lips moving like he was doing math in his head. We had nodded, a soft acknowledgement like old-timers give when they recognize a common solution: work. In the diner, his hands were wrapped around a mug so old the glaze had surrendered in a white crescent, his knuckles broad, the kind you don't make by sitting still. His hair was silver near the ears and darker on top, and he wore one of those flannel shirts that had survived 2 owners or 2 decades. When he looked up, his eyes were the kind that carry something steady behind them. Some men wear their stories like medals, bright, obvious, loud. Some hold them in a quiet that makes you lean forward. He was the second kind. Ruth topped off my cup and said, "You two should know each other. You both are always asking for scrap wood from the back." Then she laughed the way people laugh when they're proud of their own matchmaking. "Tom, this is Michael." "Michael, that's Tom. Don't let him tell you no. He's got time to help." Michael lifted his hand. A hello that was halfway between wave and handshake. The good manners of a man born before everything became a performance. "Morning," he said. The word had weight, the kind that comes from years of meaning it. "Morning," I said. "Scrap wood enthusiasts are a rare breed." I stood, stepping toward his table because it felt better than shouting across the aisle, and he nodded at the chair opposite him. "If you don't mind company," he said, "I'm waiting on pancakes I probably shouldn't order." "I'll keep your secret," I told him, easing into the chair and placing my mug on a soft ring left by 1,000 mugs before mine. "We talked like you do when the day is generous with time." It surprised me how easy it was. Sometimes the first conversation with a new person is a fumbling search for common ground, like feeling for the light switch in a dark room. With him, it was more like the lights were already on. We started with the weather, of course we did. Men of our age warm up slow. We talked about the difference between lake wind and ocean wind, how a mistake in judgment on the water is less forgiving than a misstep in your driveway. He told me he'd retired from teaching woodshop and history. 2 subjects I thought shouldn't belong to the same person until I saw the way his hands gestured. Drawing maps in the air and invisible dovetails with equal comfort. I told him about my years walking my route, how I measured time by changing porch decorations and the progress of a garden and a boy turning into a college student while I slipped bills and birthday cards into the same slot. He asked if I had family nearby. I told him about Carrie down in Portland, who drove up once a month and tried to mother me in a way that makes a father feel both loved and slightly scolded. He smiled at that, said he had a nephew in Boston and the best set of neighbors a man could ask for, if only because Miss Evelyn across the street can see through walls and insists on feeding me at least twice a week. He told me he was 58, had come to Harbor's Gate after his own kind of ending. He didn't say what it was, and I didn't pry. The kindness you can give a stranger is the grace of not asking what you can tell he's not ready to tell. Our pancakes, the ones I ordered in solidarity, arrived, and we built a little silence between us that felt more like a pause than an end. He cut them neatly like a man who respects good lines. Then he said, "I'm fixing up an old skiff, named after my mother, but the old paint flaked off so only the M and an E survived. It looks like it says me, and I can't decide if that's vain or honest." "Could be both," I said. "Is it one of those narrow things that look like it was taught to behave by a stern father?" "That's the one," he smiled. "She's sound, but she needs sanding and fresh ribs. If you like scrap wood, you might talk me out of throwing half the planks away. I'd hate to be the man who tosses something that could be useful." "That's my kind of fear," I said. "I'll come by, if you want." He nodded, then said something like an afterthought, but delivered like a promise. "Any day after 10 is good. Mornings are for pretending I'm young, and afternoons remind me I'm not." That might have been the moment. Not the part where he invited me, but the way he said it. The humor, the ease, the way he let me see the honest shape of his day. It felt like the door that had been tapping softly for months took a breath and waited for my hand on the knob. I went to see the skiff the next morning. His garage smelled like cedar and patience. The boat rested in the cradle like a kid on a swing, all curves and potential. He had a heater kicking in the corner, a small radio tuned low to an oldies station, and a neat line of electric sanders nesting like sleeping birds. He handed me a mask and goggles and said, "Let's do this right." We worked shoulder to shoulder, the rhythm familiar in its foreignness. My hands remembered how to carry a mail bag and how to tie a good knot and how to fold laundry in thirds. They were learning a new kindness now, how to move with wood instead of against it. Michael talked about the way a curve holds the river of your attention, how boats are stories that float. When the radio played a song that meant something to one of us, one or the other would say so and tell the story that belonged to it. He told me he used to dance with someone in a kitchen to that song. I told him I'd once walked a winter route with it in my head like a secret hand warmer. We didn't name those someones. It was enough to know the songs had been there. We broke at noon for sandwiches he insisted he hadn't made from scratch, though the bread tasted like it remembered a mother and the roast beef didn't taste like a deli. We ate on the steps and watched gulls argue about a fish the size of my palm. "Stubborn creatures," he said. "Us or the gulls?" I asked. He shrugged. "Yes, if I told you we went right from sanding to forever, you'd know I was lying. The truth with men our age is a long walk along the shore, measuring where the wooden stairs are sturdy and where there's dry rot. We are more careful not because we're scared, but because we have learned the cost of breaking what still holds." We built our days in squares, a morning in his garage, an afternoon at the community center fixing a door that wouldn't close without pretending it was 5 inches shorter, a shared list for the grocery store so we didn't both buy time when what we needed was rosemary. He said, "I go to the town meeting sometimes. You might come along. It's good for a man to be seen and to see. Keeps the edges of the world from shrinking." I went. He was right. It mattered to sit on a folding chair and listen to neighbors argue gently about the pier fees and whether the holiday parade could share the fire station bathrooms with the toy drive volunteers. When Mrs. Barlow from the library spoke, he listened like she was reading poetry, and later, when he called her by name and thanked her for recommending a mystery novel, I realized he had a way of tending to people with the same patience he gave to wood. Care doesn't make a loud sound when it works. It just leaves fewer splinters behind. On a Sunday in late November, he asked if I wanted to go for a walk along the bluff. The sky had forgotten it was supposed to be kind, and the wind ran around us like a boy who was told not to. We tucked our chins into our collars. On the path, there's a place where the trees open and you can see the light sit on the water in a way that makes you quieter without making you sad. He stopped there. We stood shoulder to shoulder. Then he said, not looking at me, "I haven't dated in 8 years." The words were simple and careful, set in a line like he was building something. "Well," I said, "you're in luck." "Neither have I." He laughed, relief like a match held over kindling. "I like working with you," he said. "I like your mind, the way you think before you talk, and your patience when my temper goes up on its hind legs." "I like your pancakes," I said, and his laugh snuck out again. Then I added quieter, "I like you." The wind ran past us, tried to take the words with it. He didn't let it. "Good," he said. "Let's see what we can make." If I had been a younger man, these beginnings might have been fireworks, but I wasn't. Fireworks are for when you need to be louder than you feel. We needed the opposite. The days that followed were the kind of careful that looks easy from the outside. He would hand me a tool, and I would take it in a way that told him I knew how important it was. He would ask how my shoulder was after lifting the bulkhead and believe me when I said, "Fine," and leave it alone when I added, "But I might be slower tomorrow." We made each other tea with the careful attention of men who had learned to listen to the quiet part of instructions. The part that's implied but essential. Don't rush me. Don't fix me. Sit with me. There was a night, a week before Christmas, when the town gathered to light the tree on the green. It's not a big tree, and it's not fancy, but it matters. I stood next to Michael in my best coat, which isn't saying much, and watched kids wrap scarves around their chins like armor. The brass band was exactly as mediocre as it should be to make everyone love them. When the lights finally went up, a cheer rose that wasn't about bulbs or branches. It was a sound that said we were still here, a little battered, a little tired, still here. Michael took my gloved hand. He did it under cover of the crowd and the cold, but it was also, in its quiet way, a declaration. My hand fit his like we were things made to join at the edge. The electric light washed over the faces around us, and in that moment, for the first time in my life, standing in the open, I felt something inside me align. I don't mean fireworks. I mean the clean click of a drawer sliding into the right place. "Tom?" a voice said. It was Carrie. Of course it was. Life has timing we couldn't script if we tried. She had driven up with her boyfriend, Josh, for the tree lighting, and there she was, cheeks ruddy with the cold and eyes sharp from knowing me since she had hung onto my index finger to steady herself. Her gaze went to our hands. In the long space of 1 second, I thought of 100 Sundays, of cutting her pancakes into quarters while she studied my face for truth, of teaching her to drive and to tie a tie and to be strong without being mean. I thought of the promise I had made without knowing it when we first held her, the one to never surprise her in a way that would make her feel alone. I didn't let go. Not of the hand that had only just found mine, and not of the promise. I squeezed Michael's fingers and stepped forward. "Bug," I said, the name I hadn't used in years but felt right now. "This is Michael." Michael, to his credit, didn't fumble or look away. He lifted his chin through the cold and stuck out his hand. "It's good to meet you, Carrie," he said. "Your dad is a better sander than he pretends." Her face did something complicated. Surprise, yes. A small guarding of the eyes, yes, but then a soft, slow smile. "Is that right?" she said. "Because I've seen him pretend to be good at a lot of things. He's usually honest about what he's not." "Then he's a rare man," Michael said. We stood there, the four of us, while the town sang a carol in the key angels would struggle to find. Carrie didn't say anything else until later back at my place, when Josh took refuge in the kindness of my record collection. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and folded her hands, her mother's hands, small and sure. "Dad," she said, just that, and all of the years in the way she said it. I didn't know. "I know," I said. "I didn't let you." I didn't let myself either. Not for a long time. I loved your mother, Carrie. You know that. We were good friends. We raised you. We did our best. But there was a door that never opened because I didn't even walk down that hallway. It was a different time. And then time kept moving and I didn't know how to catch up. Tears, the good kind, gathered in her eyes. "Are you happy?" "With him?" I said. "With you," she said. I felt the question go through me like a lighthouse beam. Not a demand, but a steady, sweeping search for truth. "I'm getting there," I told her. "I'm not scared in the way I used to be." And when he looks at me, I feel seen. Not reviewed. Seen. Like the parts of me that have chores to do and the parts that are still figuring it out are both invited to sit down and have coffee. She laughed a little, wiped her cheek. "You and your coffee." "Well," I said, "it's the language I'm fluent in." She stood and came to me, wrapped her arms around my shoulders. She was taller than her mother had been, and she smelled like the peppermint lotion she always bought me for Christmas, as if she were trying to keep me young. Into my ear, she said, "Then be happy. I can learn the rest." Michael and I moved inside the slow rhythm of winter. If you're from a place where the winter lays easy, you might not understand how it trains you to be patient without collapsing. Things take longer when you put on a coat to take out the trash, but they also ask you to pay attention. We watched the skiff's ribs take shape. We watched ice lace itself along the edge of the inlet and peel away when the sun found it. We learned how much silence our conversations could carry without breaking, and how much talk our silences could hold without thinning out into nothing. There were small things that told me this was different. The time I tried to lift a box too heavy and he didn't stop me with an order but with a hand on my forearm, a look that said he knew exactly what I was proving and he didn't need me to prove it. The way he left notes on the back of receipts. "Ruth says we need nutmeg, do we? M. And how those notes made me feel more chosen than any poem ever had. The afternoon he fell asleep on my couch with the sun laying gold squares across his face and his mouth open in that unself-conscious way people lose after 30 until someone makes them feel safe again. I counted his breaths like a man who has been lost counts steps when he finds the path. He told me, slowly, about his ending. There had been a man named David. They had been together for 12 years in a small rented house with fruit trees, which seems like paradise until you're the one picking the fruit and worrying how the jam will set. David had been sick for a long time before he left, a body story, so their ending wasn't a surprise, but it was an ending all the same. "I learned to be brave in long, thin ways," he said, "the kind you can't brag about." After David died, Michael moved. I needed a place where no one would look at me with that mercy I hadn't asked for. I needed to look at water that didn't remind me of our lake, and I needed to wait until the music in the kitchen sounded different. I told him about my own quiet, the years of being a good husband in the ways I knew, reliable, kind, present, and the way that good still left a room unvisited. I told him I had come to understand that all truth doesn't arrive at 25. Sometimes it turns the corner at 60 and is still wearing its traveling clothes. He took my hand then, the way a man holds a hand when he makes room for it in his own, and said simply, "I'm glad you found me. I'm glad I found you." It's a small miracle when love translates itself into a language both of you speak. Spring came with the clumsy confidence of a foal. The town green turned a green that would be embarrassing on a car but looks exactly right on grass. The skiff gleamed under its last coat of paint, a softer cream than the old hardened white, and we argued for a day about whether to freehand the name or stencil it. "The old letters gave me a start," he said, "M and E. Maybe we let them tell us what they want to be." "I've got an idea," I said, picking up a pencil and sketching on a scrap of cardboard. "What if we let the M stay and then fill the space after it with something that changes its meaning but tells the truth? Not me, not the old Mary or Mona or whatever she was. What if we write M-Y mate, 2 words, like a promise? M-I mate, so it keeps the old M, but it tells the new story." He stood with his hands on his hips, looked down at my chicken scratch, and blinked at me like I had told him the secret name of rain. "My mate," he said softly, testing the words in his mouth. Then, because he was that kind of man, he looked up and met my eyes to make sure I knew what he was hearing. "My mate." Of course we laughed. It was cheesy, and it was perfect. We stenciled carefully. He held the curve, I held the straight edges, and we both stepped back when it was done to see something both true and a little funny grinning back at us. My mate. It felt like we had placed our little shared stubborn joy on the bow and dared the water to deny it. On launch day, The town turned out like it does for any attempt to put something into the water without losing a man's dignity in the process. The fire chief was there with a rope and 2 volunteers who had the long legs of youth and the understanding of physics of people who don't yet believe gravity is an agreement. Mrs. Barlow brought lemonade. Ruth arrived with biscuits no one admitted to eating before noon. We backed the trailer down. Michael climbed into the skiff and ran his hands along the inside like a blessing. He glanced up at me and I nodded. He trusted my nod. We slipped her in. 2 hours later, I found myself at the oars, the sun stamping everything it touched with approval, and Michael at the stern, smiling with his whole face, the particular kind of pride a teacher has when his student gets it right. "How's she, Carrie?" he called. "Like she knows who she is," I yelled across the small distance. "Good," he said. He tapped the painted name with a knuckle and added, soft enough only I heard it over the friendly clatter of water against wood, "That makes 2 of you." We didn't rush. I was long past the age of rushing for the sake of it. But there is a kind of urgency that isn't panic. It's gratitude. We made a habit of using the words we meant while we had time to say them. We packed picnic baskets so good even we were surprised, and we ate on the shore watching the gulls and the kids teaching their dogs to be brave in water that had no interest in whether a dog felt brave or not. We went to the farmer's market and argued about radishes as if they were politics, because it's important to practice disagreement on things that won't hurt you. We walked slowly down the aisles at the hardware store, the way men of a certain age walk in places where everything promises competence, and he taught me that there's always a better way to store nails. Then, one afternoon in June, as the lilacs gave up and let summer in, Michael went quiet in a way that was different from his usual thoughtful quiet. He put his hand to his chest, opened his mouth, closed it, and sat down at the edge of the bed like he was listening for something that had gone into the next room. "Michael?" I said, my voice coming from far away, like the way you hear yourself when you're underwater. He started. And then he looked up at me with apology in his eyes, like someone who knocked over a glass in a good restaurant. "I think I need a doctor," he said. "I won't narrate that afternoon in detail because some moments belong to the adrenaline in your blood and some to the privacy of a man's fear." We went. The drive was short and long at the same time. The ER smelled like disinfectant and hope. They were kind. It was not a heart attack, and the relief in that sentence still sits down when I say it. It was angina, pain asking for attention, a knock you'd be a fool to ignore. They kept him overnight, watched numbers and lines and the rhythm that means stay or go. I called Carrie. I let myself put my head down for 10 minutes. I got up when he woke and made a joke about hospital socks, and how the only thing less flattering was the gowns. He reached for my hand and found it. "Hey," he said, like he had discovered me again and liked what he found. "Hey," I replied. He cleared his throat. "I don't want this to scare you away," he said. "I don't want to be the man who needs more than you signed up for." "I signed up for the truth," I said. "I'm not going anywhere. You're my mate." There it was, our little joke, our grand vow. The words we'd painted on the boat and on our morning lists, and on the evenings when he slept with the window open, because he said the ocean could call him back if it needed to. He exhaled something small and tight, loosening at the edge of his mouth. "Okay," he said. "Okay." He came home with a stack of papers and a set of instructions we took with the reverence of new parents. We walked around the block like boys counting the steps to the swimming hole. He ate differently, carefully. I learned how to make fish in a way that would have impressed a restaurant if a restaurant knew the value of a Tuesday dinner nobody took a picture of. We carried on. That's what love is, mostly. Carrying on. Not ignoring the knock, but also not handing over the key. We didn't tell every person we knew about us. We didn't make a speech at the town meeting. The news worked its way through the town the way news does in a place where people see you buying apples together for long enough. "My mate," he would say under his breath when someone gave us a look that asked a question they didn't have the courage to put in words. And I'd feel a solidity stand up in me like an old barn. Seasoned, useful, nobody's fancy. We weren't making a statement. We were making dinner. Still, there were days when being 2 men in love old enough to remember the first time you could say that out loud wasn't simple. A mechanic in the next town said something that shrunk the room. A relative sent a card without including both our names. A neighbor took too long to wave. When those days arrived, we used what we had: humor, patience, the knowledge that you don't have to pick up every stone laid at your feet. And when the room actually did shrink and the air thinned, we went down to the water where the horizon refused to be small. We'd sit on the steps of the pier with our knees touching and let the bay remind us that our little story wasn't a mistake. And sometimes someone would stop by. A kid with a question about sanding a skateboard. Or Mrs. Barlow with a bag of slightly soft apples. And the air would widen again. Like a friend opening a window in a stuffy room. In July, we took the skiff out past the point to where the water changes the way it breathes. The wind went lazy and the sun had removed its hat. He wore the old red cap he said made him look like a grandpa, even though he would never call himself vain. I rowed because he pretended it was my turn while steering every decision with gentle nudge and smile. We drifted for a while, the kind of drifting that's earned by all the times you have not drifted when it mattered. He told me a story about his father teaching him to sharpen a knife. I told him a story about a house on my route that had a dog who waited for me every day for 6 years and then did not. He squeezed my knee, and I felt the press of that kindness long after his hand lifted. Then he asked, casual and not at all, "Do you want to hear something I've been thinking?" He took off his hat and put it on the bench beside him, turned it so the brim lined up with the angle of the boat, like that would make the words ride better over the next wave. "I've been thinking we could make it official. Not because the state cares, though it finally does, and I'm grateful. Not because the town needs it in a file, for me. For the kitchen at night when the lights are off and the house gets bigger. I want to be able to get up and drink a glass of water and know I can call you my mate without any room. Left for the kind of doubt that sneaks in when you're past 50 and everyone told you your real chances. We're behind you." I looked at him. The man who had taught my hands what a clean curve feels like, and measured my answer the way you measure twice before you cut. "Yes," I said, because the truth didn't need more words. Then, because I am long-winded in the ways that matter, I added, "Let's stand by the water and say it where we can hear ourselves. Let's wear our best shirts and conduct the business of our own hearts the way decent men conduct anything important, soberly, with good witnesses, and without making anyone feel small." He laughed and swore I had read that somewhere, probably from a judge. We set a date, just family and a handful of friends, 2 weeks later, on a Sunday evening when the heat would be kind enough to stand back and let the breeze find people's backs. Carrie cried when I told her, and then she asked if she could read something. I told her she could read the tax code if she wanted, and I would still be proud. She picked a poem. Josh offered to take pictures. Mrs. Barlow insisted on making the bouquet, even though we were two men who wanted to hold hands, not flowers. She brought a cluster of hydrangeas and rosemary so fragrant it out-talked the beer. It all came together like any good community thing does. Messy, generous, better than planned. On the day, I woke early. My hands wanted something to do, so I polished the rails on the skiff until they reflected the world back at me in a way that somehow made the world look kinder. Michael came down the stairs in a white shirt I hadn't seen him wear before, the fabric crisp enough to make a sound, and a tie the color of the bay just before the sun decides it's done. He looked like a man who knew what he was doing and was grateful to be doing it. He looked like home. Folks gathered. The kids ran, fell, laughed like kids are supposed to. Old Mr. Jenkins, who never learned how to stop squinting at the world, brought a lawn chair and positioned it so he could spy on everyone without anyone thinking he was watching them. Carrie stood next to me, the poem folded in her hand, and whispered, "You're okay?" I nodded. "I'm better than okay," I said, surprised by my own steadiness. We didn't hire anyone to officiate. We asked Miss Evelyn, who can see through walls and insists on feeding Michael in addition to her husband, to say a blessing. She stepped up, took a deep breath that filled her with the seriousness of the thing, then smiled. "I'm not one for speeches," she said, and then gave one so perfect the world held its breath. She talked about old love and new love being part of the same family, about recognizing your person when you've learned to recognize yourself, about mates in every sense of that word, the one you row with, the one who knows where the flashlight is, the one who will laugh at your old jokes because they love old things and will learn your new jokes because they love you. We stood across from each other, the water behind us, throwing back the sun in coins we couldn't spend, and we said our vows. Not long, not performative. We promised to carry on. We promised to mind the small things and honor the big ones. He promised to tell me when he was scared and let me sit next to him and not fix it. I promised to ask for help before the ladder got too high. He called me his mate. I called him mine. The breeze lifted the edges of the white tablecloth, and a collective sigh went up like a sheet being shaken loose in the backyard on laundry day. Then we kissed the way men who know they are seen kiss, without apology. The party after was a happy mess. Music played, the kind chosen because someone once danced to it in a kitchen and wanted to feel that certain kind of young again. We ate cake we did not need and took pictures nobody had to be coaxed into, even the teenage boys who pretend they don't exist when a camera lens comes out. Michael leaned in and said, "You're my family now," like an announcement and a reminder. I said, "We always were. Today we're just telling the town about it." Months after, our life wasn't different in the big ways. We still argued about whether the good knife should be used on tomatoes. We still left notes on the back of receipts. We still made a point of going down to the water even when the weather said stay home, because a person should always stand where they can see far. But something subtle shifted. The place in my chest that had known how to hold its breath relaxed. The place in his jaw that had clenched at noises only he heard eased. It's not that you need a piece of paper to love. It's that sometimes you need a day that reminds you people are on your side. Winter came again, as it always does, with its own instructions. We followed them. He went in for another test in January. Numbers looked good. We had soup to celebrate. I had a tooth pulled and complained like someone had removed a small part of my patience through my gums. He put a hot pack on my cheek and told me I was brave even when I wasn't. We lived the dailiness so many stories skip, because it's where most of the beauty hides. The mornings when we drank coffee on the step and watched our breath leave in little puffs. The afternoon we got a flat tire and changed it in under 15 minutes because between us we had changed 100. The evening the power went out and we lit candles and played gin rummy by the light, and it felt like volunteering to go back in time with the one person you'd choose to sit in the dark with there. Was a storm that year that the weathermen named like a dog because it was going to stick around and make itself inconvenient. It blew in hard and stuck its fat thumb on the town. The bay heaved like an old horse asked to gallop after a long rest. We listened to the weather radio's calm voice explain pressure systems and storm surge like it was reading a bedtime story we should not sleep through. Michael looked at me, I looked at him, and we did what people in small towns do. We checked on folks. We put trash cans on their sides so the wind couldn't teach them to fly. We filled thermoses with coffee, because in a storm, coffee can be a form of medicine. When the wind was at its loudest, a knock came on our door. It was a kid from 3 houses down, wet hair, big eyes, the kind of nerves you have when you know you're supposed to be brave but you're 17. "Mr. Michael," he said, the way kids borrow a first name and make it formal because they haven't decided what to call you. "Mrs. Jensen's porch, her steps. They're moving. She can't get out. And her son's stuck on the other side of the road." We grabbed hats and coats, because instinct runs ahead of fear if you let it. The porch steps had shifted in the way of old wooden things that resent being told to endure more than they had signed up for. The water was climbing onto the sidewalk like a confident guest. We moved without panicking. Michael told the boy where to stand and when to hand him the board like they had rehearsed. I braced while he levered. We made a temporary path, steady enough for a small woman to put her trust in. She came out, clutching a bag with her pills and a picture frame, the things a life teaches you to grab. Michael took her elbow. I held her hand on my shoulder. We took 2 steps at a time, slow and fast, those paradox twins. We got her to the truck, and her son took the wheel like a person receives a precious thing. Back home, soaked and buzzing with the particular grateful adrenaline you only get when what could have gone wrong went right, Michael stripped off his sweater. His hair was a comedy of cowlicks. He laughed, that full laugh that no storm says no to, and fell into a chair. "My mate," he said, like a prayer and a tease, like a map and a compass. I answered him in the only way that made sense. I poured him coffee and put my dry socks on his cold feet. People sometimes think love at our age is a consolation prize, a careful, quiet thing offered like a seat near the heater after the dance has ended. They don't know. Or they haven't had the luck to find what we found, the kind that isn't loud because it doesn't need to be, the kind that looks you in the eye across a breakfast table and asks about your appointment and your book with the same attentive curiosity, and then smiles like both your answers are worth the day. If I could go back and talk to the man I was at 55, I'd tell him that it's okay to be late to your own party. The cake's still good. The music still knows your name. The person you hoped might be there is still going to laugh at your jokes. In the spring after the storm, we sat in the skiff with a thermos of coffee, because some patterns are fitter than the weather, and watched the town put itself back together in ways both practical and ceremonial. We waved to the fire chief, who waved back with a hammer. A little girl in yellow boots saluted us with a stick she was clearly using as a sword. We talked about nothing. We talked about something. He reached for my hand. We let our fingers tangle, the way roots do underground when they want to hold each other up. He said, "You know I'm not big on anniversaries." I told him I knew. "But I would like to mark one thing." He nodded toward the bow. The letters were a little worn now, the edges softened by salt and time. "My mate," he said. I told him a story I hadn't told him before. About a day on my old route when it rained so hard my socks made a sound when I walked, and a woman put a towel on her doorstep because she didn't want the mailman to drip on her mat. She handed me a cup of coffee, and on the side of the cup, someone had taken a marker and written, "You made it." It was such a small kindness, I almost missed it. "You made it," I said, tracing the letters on the bow with my finger. "We made it." He smiled at a point just over my shoulder, the sky maybe, or whatever it is people look at when they let joy work through them before it shows up on the face. "We did," he said. And then in a voice he saved for the truest things, "I love you, Tom." Sometimes those 3 words are a drum roll. For me, in that skiff, in the quiet center of our small life, they were a chair. A good wooden chair, solid, made by hands that know the measurements of the human body, the kind of chair you can sit in without checking its legs. "I love you too," I said, and I let the chair hold me. If you're watching this, if you've walked with me through this soft old town and its hard new weather, through the hardware store aisles and the doctor's test results and the long evenings that belong to 2 mugs on a kitchen table, this is what I want you to know. It's not too late. It's not too late for your heart to admit something it has been whispering for years. It's not too late to learn a new craft, the kind that doesn't need a heater and a sander but does need patience, humor, and a willingness to be seen. It's not too late to hold a hand at a tree lighting and decide you're not letting go for anyone's convenience. It's not too late to call someone your mate and mean every tool belt, boat building, sandwich making, hospital socks, storm braving layer of that word. We are not saints. We are not news. We are 2 men who met over pancakes and turned that lucky morning into a life. When he falls asleep on the couch now, I still count his breaths sometimes. Not because I'm afraid they will stop, but because counting them feels like a way of thanking the world for every rise and fall. When I set 2 mugs on the table, the sound they make is the sound of continuity. When we argue about the proper onions for a stew, we're arguing because we care about feeding each other right, and that is a kind of faith. Last week, we went to the diner again. Ruth has gotten more insistent about vitamins and less tolerant of people who don't bust their own tables. She wiggled her eyebrows in a way that would embarrass a teenager and asked if married life suited us. Michael said he had never slept better. I said his snoring had a rhythm I grew fond of. The college kid at the counter turned and grinned at us like he understood more than people assume he does. A toddler dropped a fork. It was all so normal it made me choke up, which would have also embarrassed a teenager if he hadn't been watching his phone. On our way out, a man I didn't know tipped his hat and said, "Beautiful day." It was. We stepped into it together. The air had that clean edge it gets in the morning. The bay breathed. The horizon spread its patient hands. Michael squeezed my shoulder, the way he does when he wants to say a lot at once with one touch. We walked toward the water, 2 men the world had told their best years would be behind them, and we proved the world wrong in the finest way you can, by quietly having a good day. By planning dinner, by waving to a neighbor, by checking the skiff's lines, by being my mate and his. There's a photograph on our mantel now. Not the wedding picture, though we have one of those and it's nice. This one is small. We didn't frame it for how we look. We framed it for what it shows. The skiff, my mate, just a little to the left of the dock. The water smooth as the top of a piano. 2 sets of footprints on the pier leading to the boat, none leading away. If you look closely, you can see the way the rope lies like a lazy snake. You can see the handprint on the paint where someone steadied himself. You can see the place where light tried to hide under the edge and failed. Because some things just glow. When guests ask about the picture, Michael tells them about cedar and sanding and how to bend a rib without cracking it. I tell them about the morning we named a boat and a life with the same 2 words. And if they linger, if they're the kind of people who ask the beautiful questions, the ones that start with, "How did you know?" or "Were you afraid?" I tell them the truth. I tell them I knew when I looked up in a diner and saw a man holding a mug like it was worth holding. I tell them I was afraid, and then I remind them that fear is not a stop sign. It's a yield. I tell them we yielded to something good, and I tell them that every day since, we've been learning the same lesson. Love, even late, walks in like a sunrise slipping through old curtains. And if you're smart, you open the windows. He's upstairs now, as I say this into a microphone so it can travel to you. He's humming because he does that when he's putting on a shirt with buttons, as if music gives his hands something to do. We've got a list on the counter: bread, lemons, battery for the smoke detector, nutmeg, which we do not need but Ruth will insist we do, and a note at the bottom that says walk at 4. It's in his handwriting, which has a way of leaning forward at the end of a word like it's excited to see what's next. I'm excited too. Old, yes, in the ways my knees remind me. Set in my ways, probably, but also somehow new, not new like a shining coin. New like a well-made chair after you've sanded it and realize there's more grain than you thought. New like a skiff that has been in the water and knows how to carry you. New like saying out loud, to anyone who needs to hear it, to anyone who thinks the word is for younger men, that I have a mate, he has a mate, and we did not miss our chance. We were simply arriving at the right harbor. The bell above the diner door still rings when we walk in. The old gas heater in his garage still wakes up with a grunt. The town meetings still go too long. Sometimes the weather still invites itself over and stays until we're all a little cranky. We still cut our pancakes with more precision than they deserve. And every morning, before the coffee, before the radio tells us anything we can't change, we look at each other and we say something small. Not the big declarations. Those are for special days. We say, I'm glad you're here. We say, what time is your appointment? We say, don't forget your hat. We say, my mate, and we mean it every time.